I'm prepared to vote on the item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. McSork. Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt.
So I have a question for Mr. Killebrew about contracts and commitments. So, I mean, one of the things that is positive, and every time we've had the discussion about the carryover budget, it always is a discussion about trying to understand the budget once the carryovers have been brought in, because we start off the year with a budget and then we carry over, and then it's a little hard to, we don't carry over revenue, but we carry over a beginning account balance that changes, which it doesn't show up in revenue and expense. So it always distorts the picture. But one of the, and so now we're down, so to carry over to 120K, which is significantly less. And we're trying to align contracts with fiscal years, so we don't have as many contracts that are out there. But when we go out to bid a contract and then grant the bid, we have to have the budget approved before that contract can be let, correct?
Except under emergency circumstances, and then we have to bring it back to you for ratification. So, yes,
So
generally,
in
yes.
our normal world, yes. I mean, yes, there could be an exception, but it would be unusual. Well, the reason, because when we look at the big projects that carry over where we know they're not going to get done in a fiscal year, and maybe sometimes not even started, and therefore we're carrying a couple of $1 million sometimes from a fiscal year. But that contract that may not have been executed yet was let in the previous year in most cases, and therefore the money was committed in. And by the way, we have to approve the budget for it. That budget is, we can't pull that budget back after the contract's been committed, so we can't actually go reduce, I mean, our expenses are more tied to contract commitments, and we don't allocate that money out on a month-by-month basis and say, you know, okay, that's $2 million contract, I'm going to assume I'm going to spend it even over a month. That actually hits and shows up at the time we execute the contract or at the time we pay the bill, right? So
we commit it with the budget. That's what you're doing. You're not actually spending it, but you are committing it to something.
Right. So in our budget, sometimes we've committed that money, even though it didn't get spent, that money gets carried into the next fiscal year. But it's been committed, and therefore we look like we're way out of whack in the capital. I mean, this is in the capital side of the budget generally, but that causes some of that distortion, if I understand it right. Is that correct?
Well, unfortunately, the way we have to get council approval for budgets is annually. If we could do it the way we all want to do it, we would say approve the budget for this project, even if it takes 3 years.
Yeah.
But that's not the way we have to do things. We have to do them annually. So we do have to break it up.
It gets broken up into a budget, but at some point we've committed we've signed the contract, and the contract has an amount.
We commit the money on day one. If we only spend a third of it by the end of the fiscal year, we recommit the 2/3 that haven't been spent yet. So,
right. We recommit it to the budget, but we've actually, I mean, that money is committed, right?
It's
I mean,
committed
it was
on-
committed on the contract. So that really, in the case of this year, that's, you know, that's $4.5 million of distortion in our budget when you look at those. And so it looks, we've tried to weigh, I mean, I appreciate what Councilmember Lewis asked, which is, is there a way we can make this look easy? And I have about 1 million spreadsheets where I've tried to do that. And I think I've generally satisfied myself, but I haven't ever come up with a way that made the world look right with the way the accounting system functions on, you know, basically fund accounting and without a, you know, open to commit view of the world. So anyway, thank you. That's all I have. Comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt. You know, Ms. Lewis and Mr. Wyatt kind of covered what I want to talk about the how this $4 million looks, and that even though it hasn't been spent, it has been committed, and to try to do anything different would make, I think, would skew the budget even more to say this $4 million has been spent, but it's still in the account, even though it's committed. So I don't want to do something that makes it look like I have more money and I can change my mind on how I want it spent, and then the commitment's not made later down the road. I don't really view that as a missed forecast. I just think that's good public accounting. So I want to thank you guys, thank staff for this. This is great news. I mean, we have an additional $3 million that we hadn't planned on because of all the great work that staff's done in reducing expenses and the unexpected increase in revenues. So with that, other than the kudos, okay, Ms. Lewis.
Sorry, I just have a question. I'll try to make it quick. I don't really consider that my question being fast versus thorough is where I'm going, but I'll try to make it some combination. Mr. Wyatt brings up a good question that you were saying we can't approve a project and say we're going to spend X, Y, and Z. Can we? Can we change our policy, or can we change something so that we can actually approve a project and approve that it's going to be spent over some period of time?
Not that I know of. I'd have to dig back into the government code, but we're required to adopt annual budgets. The only way you can commit future councils is through a contract. So we commit the funds via the contract for those projects, but I don't know that that this council could commit the next council budgetarily without actually having a contract in place.
Okay.
So it's not something I've ever seen. I'd have to go look for that question, but this is the way every government does it. So I would be surprised if there was an opportunity there for this council to say, we're going to approve a Doheny Village project. It
Yeah.
might take us 3 years to get the money, but we're going to go ahead and commit it now budgetarily, but without a contract from an outside company requiring us to do it. I don't see how it would have any force or effect, because the next council could change it. So
But could we say we're going to do this project and we estimate that this project will be $4 million and it'll take us 3 years to do it? Could we set up a reserve that says this project only is what we're going to use this for, and we're going to do it over, fiscal year 1, 2, and 3?
That's essentially what you've done with the update to the general plan reserve that's in this proposed budget. You've set aside $1 million to update your general plan. We
Okay.
don't know yet how long that process will take, but you have budgeted to do that. Now, ultimately, we'll probably bring you a contract for a consultant to help us with that. So some of or all of that money will get obligated through that contract. And depending on if that contract crosses different fiscal years, we could budget for it in different fiscal years. But that's an example where you've committed $1 million to a future project. And at this point, we don't know the specific fiscal year it'll start and it'll end, but it's going to be relatively soon.
Okay, so we could, and that project may take us more than a year. Probably will. Okay, so we could be doing the same thing with these other projects, which would make it, I'm seeing. Yes?
Well, it's harder with public works projects.
Okay. Just exploring, but I see that I'm getting
I appreciate
grimaces.
it, but we do that in a weird way. That is, we set a budget for public works capital projects of a certain amount to do a list of things. And as those projects get ready to come up, and then an RFP's out, and then a bid, and finally a contract, and then that money looks spent, even though from the time that contract is, and therefore the money essentially is tied up. And the problem, I think Mr. Killebrew hit it, or you're committing a council that you may not be a member of to spend that money, because but via the contract. So as the council changes on basis and whatever, that money can't be decided to be unspent by some future one who weren't interested in doing that public project that was approved. So it's kind of how we future commit the money to those people coming after us or other things. And but it makes tracking where we are at any given end of year kind of clumsy, and I don't know what we could do to make that prettier, but it would it makes our whole job of trying to be transparent difficult. I think so that's why we keep looking at it and trying to, but all ideas are worth looking at, I think. So,
Okay, anything else? We'll go ahead and vote. Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 21, approval of lease agreement with Muller Lighthouse LLC for use of parking as shared public parking at 24532 Del Prado, Dana Point. Just quick clarification, I am not associated with Muller Lighthouse at any level. So, Mr. Denny, do we have a staff report? And actually, I believe we have a couple recusals.
I was
on
going to say, I
this.
think we have two of us who need to recuse ourselves for this.
All right. So that's Mr. Federico, Mayor Pro Tem White are recused. Mr. Denny, staff report, please.
Yes, Ms. Renders has your staff report.
Tonight before you is a lease agreement with the property owners of 24532 Del Prado, a space now occupied by Union Bank on the ground floor and a couple of office tenants on the second floor. Approval of the city-wide parking implementation plan last March includes section 3.1, long-term ongoing goals and action items. Lease public parking is one of those stated goals. It states that staff will continue to seek opportunities to expand the existing programs in other locations where appropriate. So this comes before you tonight. The lease rates as a part of this agreement are consistent with existing lease rates, and the hours are similar to the city leases with the post office and the Taco Bell parking lots. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion on this item.
Move the recommended action.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. Any public comment on this? Thank you. We have both public comment. Hoyen Ip. Oh, there she is. I didn't see you come in. You usually sit in the back corner.
Good evening, Council. Yeah. I don't have a direct question to this lease. It's sort of a tangent-ish. I brought it up here before, and I think now there's some sort of urgency to it with the RHNA, new cycle of RHNA giant number coming up. So I think, as I understood, it's the city's good intention to lease these spots, to promote business, things like that. But personally, I actually don't like free parking. I think we should have meter. Free parking encourage more traffic. If you don't have to pay, the husband, wife, because I just meet you there, so everybody drives there. But if you have to pay now, you think twice. So that's one thing. Now with this, if we have to implement this giant RHNA number, and we will just have more people, more traffic. So this is something I would think we should put into consideration how we should handle that. Another thing is, I haven't seen any EV charging station in town. Is it just that I haven't seen it, or we actually have some? Okay, no? Okay, so now out of the good intention, can we have a few of those stations to encourage people to go green on transportation? So that's another thing. When this whole thing about the new RHNA number comes up, just whole things, so many environmental things, problems will come up. So I think that's why I'm here, to make a little suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to council. I'll start with Ms. Lewis. Any questions?
Thank you. Ms. Yip, I'm so with you on the charging stations. I'd love to see us have charging stations. Okay, on the parking, all right, I have issues with the lease. And it's because we already have 3 different parking leases. I don't know if people even know about this. I don't think people know where the parking spaces are. We have 3 parking leases. They've been in effect since, well, I think about 3 years. And they have an automatic escalator clause. So we're paying for spaces, the city's paying for spaces, those spaces cost us more each year. I don't think people know where they are, but before I approve more spaces, I'd like to have some sort of study done or follow-up to see, are we using the spaces that we have? Because we all have this parking study that keeps getting quoted to me over and over again, that right now we've got more spaces than we know what to do with. And maybe at some point we will need these spaces, but if we're paying, I think we're paying on 3 leases at this point, for I don't know how many spaces, I don't remember, and I don't exactly remember where they are, and they're not all available at the same time and the same dates. And now we're adding to it. I'd really like to know, is this the best use of the money at the time? Do we need these spaces now? Are they being utilized? And do we need more spaces? Or should we look into doing something like this, which may not be a bad idea, but are we too premature? So at this point, do we have any information on the use of our spaces? Okay.
Matt, do you want to cover that?
We have done occupancy studies within the town center area. They weren't specific to capturing data on occupancy on city leased spaces, so I don't have that level of data. It was more global.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. We have, I don't remember how many spaces do you know that we've leased on these 3 separate leases?
We actually have 4 leases. We
Yeah,
have
So
12,
this will be a 5th lease?
correct. We have 12 spaces at the post office, 14 spaces in the lot where Taco Bell's located, 47 spaces at Meridian, and 29 at the community house.
Okay, so do we know, do we go by and see, are these spaces used to their maximum? You know, what the use is of these spaces?
As Matt stated, I don't think there's been a formal study that's covered that.
Okay, and so why are we leasing more spaces at this point? Because everything I'm hearing from our parking study says we don't have a parking problem. We have a parking management problem. That has been the mantra I've heard now for 3 years. And here we're going to add some more spaces. I don't actually know where these are and when they're available and how that squares with the spaces we already have and when they're available. So why are we doing this?
The council adopted the parking implementation plan in March of 2019. In section 3.1, one of the stated goals is for the staff to look for opportunities to lease parking and bring those forward to city council.
Okay, but we may not need these for several years till town center gets built out, if ever. We may need them for businesses to park their employees. There may be ways that, you know, there are other things we should look at. So at this point, for me, I feel it's premature to be adding a 5th lease until somebody brings data to me telling me why we need these and why it is worth entering into this 5th lease.
Mr. Rick Sork?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank our Economic Development Director for pursuing this opportunity, as has been directed. I think this is an excellent opportunity to add parking to our town center and add it in a place where it otherwise wouldn't be available to the public since it's on a private lot. So I want to say job well done, and I'll be supporting this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You kind of touched on something, Mr. Rick Sork, that I have a question for. So when we did our parking studies, the discussion was about all spaces in town center, in the town center, including the private spaces, correct? And we counted them all. We counted the private spaces, which ones were utilized and which ones were not.
That is correct.
And so when we talk about we don't have a parking problem, that may be correct. We don't, but those parking spaces are not available to us because they're on private lots. They're not public parking spaces. That's something that we talked in depth about. And so this creates public spaces on which would otherwise be private and not available to our residents. So, maybe what we need to do is go back and actually break that down and say, these are how many public spaces we have. These are the private spaces, how they're utilized. But I've heard that parking study more times than I really want to anymore, but that's been the issue. So thank you to our economic development director. We do need more public spaces down there and available to our residents if we're going to actually draw people in. And that was the direction of the community and the parking task force. So I'm going to also support this. If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote. Ms. Lewis, you have anything? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Okay, that vote passes 2-1. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 23, State of the City sponsorship. I think this is going to be the Miss Renders show. Ms. Renders, go ahead.
Yes. Before you tonight, staff is asking permission to solicit sponsorships to support the State of the City program for 2020. In partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, we're looking to get an early start on planning for a program which will take place in the spring of 2020. Plans are to grow the reach of the invitations and encourage greater participation amongst community groups that may be beyond the Chamber. Our goal is to offset costs, allow more time to promote the event, and produce a quality program reflective of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. To have a motion?
I move the recommended action. Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any public comment on this?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Bring it back to council. Any comments, Mr. Federico? Ms. Lewis?
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is a really good idea, and I have been speaking with Mr. Denny about this for a while, and I think he was the one who mentioned that this is where he wanted the city to go, and I think that's very creative. Thank you, guys. My one caveat, and I've been assured that this will not happen, is to keep the politics out of our sponsors. So that I'm very sensitive to, and I've been assured that that will be there. So is there some safeguard somewhere as to who we can approve as a sponsor? What's the approval process, and how do we make sure that doesn't happen? Because we had the signs go up with DPTA that created quite a stir. I don't want this getting, caught up in all that.
There is a section that we put in here of what will not be accepted, and that's commentary, advocacy, or promotional of issues, candidates, and campaigns pertain to political elections, including political parties or organizations that would have the appearance of a political purpose. So we are on alert to try to screen any of those applicants out of the process. That is something we're not looking to advocate in any way as part of the program.
And who makes the decision? You guys?
We're asking your permission for Mark and myself to screen those applicants and determine if they're appropriate event sponsors.
And those criteria are outlined on pages 4 and 5 of your staff report.
Yeah, I got that. So with that in mind, I think it's a very good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Sork. Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt.
I agree that this is something that is a positive way to really make it represent a broader set of the city and include a lot more people. So I think it's a positive move.
One quick question, Ms. Renders. In discussions with the chamber, they're supporting this, correct?
Yes, we discussed it at their board meeting this morning, and they were supportive. In fact, I thought they might include some commentary for tonight in that regard.
Yeah, I heard it, but I just wanted to clarify that they are in
Yes.
support of this. So I support this as well. Thank you for all your hard work on this. If there's no more comments, I'll go ahead and take the vote. I'm still getting used to this thing. I didn't realize I had the start vote button. I got to go okay and then start vote. I got it. Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 24. That is city council member expense reports on city websites. Mr. Denny, do we have staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a follow-up to the council's direction on May 7th of this year to improve our website to reflect the expenditure reports, financial reports for all city council members. I've got it up on the screen here. So if you see, there's your city council page. And if I click on this tab that says city council member financial reporting, it will go to that page. It'll have all of you listed in order. And then it also has all the FPPC reporting. So if I go, for example, to Mr. Mayor's page, these are all of the travel and expense reports, and those are all the FPPC reports. So we just wanted to follow up and demonstrate that we did follow up on your direction.
Thank you very much. This is a receive and file. So are there any public comments on this, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council. Mr. Federico, do you have any comments? Ms. Lewis?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Okay, so I think this is great. We all voted on this. So here's something that's come up, and I'm not sure how to address this. So now, out there is, okay, on December 11th, I will just read you this. On December 11th, 2017, she, being me, was at an airport and bored waiting for a plane. Instead of doing her business and drinking a soda with the rest of the people, she spent $54 of your money to join the United Club so as to partake in food, drink, personalized service, which could include alcoholic beverages, all free with membership. Okay, so that's not what happened. So what happened was the policy apparently when tickets, I went with a group, I believe ACCOC, to Washington to speak with our representatives as part of a group. And apparently as part of policy, which I think is a great policy, and I thank the people who did that, there's an extra upcharge, $54, I think, so that I could get, or any council member could get a priority boarding, so we can take our carry-on on instead of not getting priority boarding, have to take our carry-on and check it because there's not enough room and then wind up spending money there. This doesn't come out that way. I don't know how this came out that way. I would like something to say that these expenses have been approved. Like, it's not like I'm out there, oh, whoo, $54, I get a drink, That's not what's happening. $22 of valet parking. Yes, I did. I went to the Anaheim Hilton. The Community Association Institute was giving, I was on the list of 5 potential recipients of a speech of the year. They wanted to give me an award. So I asked, as I do prior to going, is this an approved expense? I was told yes. I was, with hundreds of other people, and this is how they parked us. So I don't have any problem with that. I just want some sort of indication that these are approved expenses, not expenses that I'm, or any of us are out there spending because, whoo, we have this payroll of unlimited money now along with our volunteer jobs. What can we do about that?
So
Maybe put approved expense,
So
city
can I make a
approved
comment on that
expense.
real quick? Because I think once it was there and you were paid for it, it was an approved expense. I mean, you're talking about people taking information and twisting it politically for their purposes, and that's just going to happen to us. I mean, it's just part of being in our position. So, I'm not sure it was paid, right? Correct? I mean,
Well,
Mr.
I
Deng?
know it was paid. It doesn't say it was paid. I mean,
Well,
it
it's-
doesn't say it was an approved expense. It doesn't give any context, and I have a problem with that.
So we've only posted online those expenses the city paid. And so if it's been paid, it's been approved.
So maybe
Um,
we could have a disclaimer up there on the page before we get to each person's, expenses have been, because I know then Lillian, who is the Dana Point Times reporter, texted me and she said one of the things she did was called you to see if that had been approved before I spent, $22 parking my car in Anaheim. So if there could be some sort of just statement upstream before we get to each person's that these are on here because they have been pre-approved by the city. I would appreciate that. Somewhere there on financial reporting.
So we have policies on what we will and will not pay for, correct?
Correct.
And so is this in our policy somewhere? I mean, I understand what you're concerned about. To me, it's just self-explanatory. If it's on there and it's part of a travel and expense report, it was paid, it was approved. Otherwise, it would not have been paid. So I'm not sure.
How about just the word pre-approved travel and expense report?
They aren't
Well, they're not all
pre-approved.
pre-approved.
Okay, approved. At some point, they're approved, right? I mean, it doesn't take a lot to give a context to what's going on there. Because I'm not the only one that's going to have this
It's
issue.
going to happen to all of us.
Right.
It's part of
So-
our job. I mean,
Well,
it's what we
it
do.
doesn't have to be. That's the thing. It can be easily remedied with a couple words on our financial reporting to let people know that, we're not out there spending your money without approval. So I am going to ask the staff to, and I'll work with you on some language if you want, but something that leaves a impression, an understanding that these are not individuals going out and making these expenditures, that these have been expenditures paid by the city because they were approved by the city. So if you want, we won't talk about that anymore. I will talk to the
Yeah,
city.
go ahead and talk to staff and see if
Very
you
good.
guys work it out.
Thank you.
Is there any objection to putting the word approved travel and expense reports on this page?
Mr. Mayor, if I can,
Go ahead.
while I don't have objections, I mean, I just don't like the principle of this. The purpose of doing this is that someone can't comment about us as elected officials. Go on Save Dana Point probably tomorrow and see how much stuff is on there about me. Or should I start looking for caveats to put in agenda or in meeting minutes to limit what other people's freedom of speech says that they can say about us? I really don't like the idea of this in principle. In practice, I really don't care.
Good.
But in principle, I think this is a bad idea. And by the way, I think every airline checks your bag for free if you check it at the gate.
No, that's not true.
At the gate, if it doesn't
That's
fit,
not true. Well,
Okay.
I had to pay $50 last time I checked a bag. But this is different. This is not somebody's Facebook page. This is the city putting this out. And that's why it's different. But I will work with the city. Thank you.
Mr. Rick Zork.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I guess hearing what just came up, I'm trying to think it through. I mean, I'm not sure where what was read or who said that or where that came from. Apparently it was, meant to take what was on the website and then make commentary on it, which, whether it's absolutely accurate or misleading or however you want to put it, if it was meant as political speech to criticize one of us, then that's something I think, as you said, it could or it does happen to all of us. And to try to pick up, I think, on what Councilman Federico was saying is the principle. I tend to agree that it seems to be an effort now to use the city website to counter any possible political criticism. And it also sort of brings up a slippery slope argument. I mean, where does it stop? If today the criticism is this is an expense that shouldn't have been made, or was the implication is that it wasn't approved, and we're trying to anticipate that, then what next? Are we going to try to put up on the city website to try to deflect any criticism that might come our way? Again, I tend to agree with Councilman Federico. It's, in practice, if it says approved travel and expense reports versus travel and expense reports, that to me says it's approved already. But I don't like the concept of trying to use our city website to, blunt any political criticism of any of us. So, I don't know if that has to go into the direction or where this goes, or that's something that the staff takes into consideration when discussing what we're going to do with this. But, there are some other issues, I think, that where does it stop? Each one of us is going to ask for an alteration to try to protect ourselves from criticism. I mean, so like I said, I tend to agree with what Councilman Federico said. I'm happy for the staff to work with this and bring it back and see if it's something that is appropriate to do. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem White.
I guess my take on it is it's not enough issue. It's not a big enough issue. I mean, it is approved travel and expense reporting. So if it will stop people wondering whether, and how that got approved by putting the word on there, it doesn't, I don't see a downside to putting it on there. I would assume that I would start with the assumption that people would know that that's approved already, but apparently since questions have come back, my assumption wasn't that solid, because they asked questions about, how do you get this approved, or who has to say it's okay. So adding the word, I mean, it won't change the behavior of anybody who wants to take an expense and is critical of one of us and wants to make a negative comment or a positive comment. It won't, adding the word on there won't change it, but it might keep somebody from calling you up and saying, don't you have to get these approved before you can do this? So I think it's, I certainly don't object for Councilmember Lewis to work with the staff and change the wording to make it clearer if that would help.
Thank you. I don't know where you were reading that from. I don't know what that is. I don't see any difference than when we have residents looking at our 460s and saying that because certain people donated to us that we're beholden to them, and it never comes up, and there's always implications that we're doing something underhanded. Where do we put that on this page as well when they start looking at our contributions and expenditures and all the other reporting that we have to do? To me, it's so self-explanatory. Travel and expense reports, people are going to have their comments. It is a slippery slope. If we're going to try to temper free speech by putting things on our website, I just think this is just part of our job. I mean, people are going to do this to us, and I don't think it's right. I don't like it when it happens to any of us, but I don't know. I mean, you can talk with staff. I just don't, nobody's saying you can't talk to staff about it. I just don't know where this thing should go. I mean, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but when you read it to me, I was like, you know what? They paid it. It's approved. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. So with that, if there's any more comments, please, by all means, go work with staff and figure something out that'll be acceptable. So this is a receive and file. Thank you, staff, for your hard work getting that up there. It does make our sites more transparent. It's a lot easier to find this information now. I appreciate that. That brings us to council reports. Mr. Federico.
I'm turning my list of meetings. I don't have anything to report. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Lewis.
I have nothing. Thank you.
Mr. Vixork.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to report. I will turn in my list of meetings after the meeting. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt.
I have turned in my list of meetings and I have nothing to report. Thank you.
I have a couple things to report. I was at OC Parks this week, or last week, I should say, last Friday. And I don't know how many of you realize all the parks we have in this county, but I went to one that I didn't know we had, and it was out in Majeska Cut. It was Madame Helena Majeska Historic House and Gardens. If you have never seen that thing, I don't even know if you know who Madame Majeska is, but in her time, she was the Meryl Streep of the world. I mean, she was of Polish descent, moved over here when she was young. She didn't speak English. She was a famous actress in Poland, and then came here because her husband, the Count, wanted to become a farmer. Found out he didn't know anything about farming. And so they were struggling making ends meet. And so she decided she needed to go back to acting and moved to San Francisco to try out for some of the theaters up there. But she didn't speak any English. She speaks 5 languages, but none of them were English. And so she got there and she had to hire a Spanish or an English instructor, realized that learning conversational English was going to take a lot longer and far more expensive than she could afford. She learned all of her different lines in English. That's all she knew. She couldn't converse with you, but she could do it in English. I mean, it's one of the most amazing places you see the history behind this home, where it is, why they're there. It's really a special place. Unfortunately, you don't have all the beautiful gardens anymore that were there when she was there, but they have what's believed to be the very first swimming pool in Orange County is on this site. It's not full of water anymore, but it was pretty cool. There's a stream that runs by it. If you get a chance, I highly recommend you going out to check this out. They have some of her costumes there. UC Irvine is one of the big collectors of Madame Majeska's memorabilia. And when you hear the docents come and they dress in period, and it's really cool to have them take you through the property. So they've rescheduled her birthday open house to October 19th. I highly recommend y'all going and check it out. They're going to have the special Majeska candies that are named after her. They didn't have any out there for us. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I think it's marshmallow chocolate and something else. So I was kind of a little disappointed in that, but you can't get everything on your tour. So I would recommend that. One of the other things I did, I was lucky enough to be invited to go down and check out the border wall in San Diego and get a chance to work with Border Patrol agents and get their take on, do walls work? Do we need walls? And during their presentation, they had stats out from 1991 when there was no border wall there. They had captured 697,000 illegal immigrants in 1991. They estimated that about 10% of who actually crossed. 2017, when they had the older version of the border wall that was easily cut through, they captured 27,000. Now, that's an interesting number, right? And when you ask them, do border walls work? They say, yes, they do. We need them, but it's not to keep people out. It's to slow people down. It gives us a chance to get there when they try to cross illegally. And one of the interesting things was that we said you need it across the entire border. And they said, well, if you're out in the middle of the Arizona or Texas desert and you're a 4-mile hike away from the nearest road, maybe we don't need a 30-foot wall out there. We're going to know you're there. We have time to come and catch up with you anyway. So, and they talked a lot about the caravans that were coming up and the bad press that they received. A lot of these Border Patrol agents, they just were not equipped for what came to the border. They were portrayed in the press and a lot of the press that, they were uncaring and unempathetic to what was going on, which couldn't be farther from the truth. They just didn't have the supplies to help. A lot of them were going home and getting their own personal baby clothes that they didn't need anymore to help these kids. They were going out buying food, they're buying diapers, they're buying formula to help these folks out. And one of the more interesting things that I learned was that because of the new immigration laws for Central American countries, a lot of even the Mexican immigrants will claim to be from Central America. And when they capture these folks, they look in their backpacks, they have a sheet that has the 5 questions that they're going to be asked with the correct answers on them. So they actually have figured out the loopholes in our immigration laws, and they're taking advantage of it. And when you hear, and this was the most interesting thing to me, when they drove us down the border, they would actually stop and say, this section right here is controlled by this cartel, and they do all the immigration across it. Every inch of that border was controlled by somebody. They said, if you're hearing that this family tried to cross without help, it's a flat out lie. They said, good luck crossing there if you don't have permission from that group, and this is what it's going to cost you to do it. So the information that you get from listening to the Border Patrol, agree with what's going on in the country or not, go talk to the folks that are on the front line. They will tell you what works, what doesn't work, what they need. So it was incredibly, it was very informational. It had a huge impact on how I view what's going on down there. And when you see what was used to be going on and what's going on now, it's a huge benefit for our border security. So with that, I will turn in my list of meetings and bring us to the staff reports. Mr. Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a busy week in Dana Point. Thursday, we're unveiling the Bruce Brown statue at Waterman's Plaza on PCH at 3 p.m. Public is invited and encouraged to attend. Saturday is California Coastal Cleanup Day. There are 4 different cleanup sites in Dana Point. Folks can go on our website and sign up. It's right, there's a link right there in our calendar section, and we will have staff at the Doheny Beach site there, and it's generally from 9 to 12 on Saturday morning. And then California Surfing Day will be celebrated in Dana Point on Monday, the 23rd, and a partnership event with the Dana Point Surf Club and the Capistrano Valley Boys and Girls Club, and that'll be at Doheny State Beach about 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon, and everyone's encouraged to get down and participate in that as well. It's a great event. 50 kids have signed up already, so a lot of fun. Thank you.
Mr. Munoz.
Yes, I'd like to report that in closed session this evening, the council on a 5-0 vote on a motion from Councilmember Federico, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt, authorized participation in an amicus brief on the Martin versus Boise case, which is the Ninth Circuit homeless case that establishes that, just gross generalization, but the concept that city anti-camping laws can't be enforced if there's not shelter space available. So that's something that'll be forthcoming.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to adjournment.
Could I just ask you to clarify one thing, that our brief is to ask the case to hear it, we're not taking a position, right?
That's correct. This is an amicus brief in a request to the Supreme Court to hear the case.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Lewis. That brings us to adjournment. The next regular meeting of the City Council will be October 1st, 2019 at 5 p.m. in the City Council chamber located at 33282 Golden Lantern Suite 210, Dana Point, California.